Summer Raines was a fascinating character at O'Toole Middle School. Yes, parents with the last name Raines actually named their daughter Summer. From 6th to 7th grade, she was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, bespectacled band kid, and somewhat of a wallflower. She mostly went unnoticed. I don't know if it was puberty or what, but Summer Raines changed during the break between 7th and 8th grade. She showed up on day 1 of class with contacts and jet black hair, wearing an earthy green shirt on top of which dangled a necklace of colorful stones. The gossip train moved quickly. We all learned Summer was now all about crystals and auras and healing energy. She acted cool about it, though. Soon other girls around the school started dressing in earthy tones and wearing crystals around their necks. A few boys did too. Summer eventually convinced a bunch of athletes that Tiger's Eye and Jade would help them perform better on the field. Once they started wearing stone-bearing necklaces and bracelets, the trend was set. Summer had primed most of the 8th grade class of 2017 to believe anything. Summer and I were not friends at the beginning of this story. We weren't anything yet. I'm not sure if we had exchanged a single word before a random Monday in April. On my way to the restroom after lunch, I passed the history room where my next class would be. I heard Summer whisper, "Boo," and stopped. Mostly hidden behind the door, Summer beckoned me into the classroom with a secretive gesture. Dubiously provoked, I slipped inside. Riley Pierce somehow slipped in immediately behind me. Riley and Summer lived next door to each other, so were natural best friends. Riley fit with the original version of Summer better, but post-transformation, Summer never asked or pressured Riley to change. In fact, Riley was openly skeptical of Summer's claims, yet her contradicting views did not harm their friendship. That's what I mean about Summer being cool about all the woo-woo stuff. She genuinely didn't care if anyone else accepted her beliefs, but she shared them anyway, in hopes that they might. "Close the door," Summer said to Riley. "You'd better hope he's quick," Riley growled back through clenched teeth. She closed the door. I asked, "Quick at what? What is this?" "This is justice," Summer announced, chin turned upward. Her eyes were half closed, as if squinting at a brighter future. I had a massive crush on Summer, though I was still too sheepish to admit it even to myself. Summer pointed at the chalkboard behind her and asked, "Do you see a face?" Besides a few eraser smears, the board looked empty. Riley said, "You're really going to have to try, Marcus. It's a stretch." Summer rolled her eyes and circled 3 dark stains near the middle of the board with her finger. The natural oil of her skin left a ring around 2 stains that looked like eyes and a third that could have been an open mouth. I could actually see other potential details in the stains too, wrinkles and that sort of thing. I'd been drawing since forever and learned through the years how to utilize unique features of the canvas at hand, be it pavement, rock, or an old beat-up chalkboard. My talents were known by a few select individuals in the school, namely kids from the literature club who I thought might want to write a graphic novel or need cover art for a book someday. Summer said, "I want you to turn those stains into a face. Draw something really creepy." "Why? Is this some new, ritual you're trying?" I asked, stupidly adding, "I don't want to do anything, evil?" Summer rolled her eyes. "No, like I said, it's justice. Mrs. Maston failed me on my history paper because she says I didn't cite credible sources. Well, sorry that your so-called credible sources conveniently ignore all the evidence that the CIA killed Martin Luther King Jr., Mrs. Maston. Anyway, I'm going to make her question everything she knows next period. I just need you to turn those stains into a face and make it as creepy as you possibly can." "Sure, but I still don't get why," I admitted. Riley said, "Don't think about it too hard. Personally, I don't really get it either. But the next period starts in 3 minutes, so you'd better get started." I had nothing to gain by helping them, and nothing to lose by just walking away. But when Summer turned and looked at me like some kind of hero, when she barely audibly whispered, "Please," I caved. I imploded. I was crushed, you might say. I drew the face in 2 minutes and 32 seconds, and it looked like it. I turned those stains into a gaunt visage of desperate fright. I aimed for scary and landed on scared. About halfway through, I'd realized my face gave off the wrong vibe and blurred the edges of the mouth to give the impression of limitless expansion, like it might keep growing large enough to swallow you. I decided to apply this effect to the eyes as well, except for their tiny pupils. I never envisioned a nose, so did not include one. At the very last second, I added a detail which seemed totally opposed to Summer's original vision, but seemed to fit perfectly with my accidental creation. Tears. I chalked long tears running down from the terror-stricken eyes. Then, worried I ruined the whole thing, I turned to Summer. She looked confused at first, but then a hint of a smile twitched in the corner of her mouth. She clapped her hands together and said, "Not what I was picturing, but you just gave me a way better idea. It's perfect, Marcus. Thank you." We had no time for further conversation as the rest of the class started filing in. Mrs. Maston walked in after most of the students, sucking on a smoothie straw. She held her cup in one hand and her phone in the other, on which she texted furiously with one thumb. Thus distracted, she did not notice my drawing on the chalkboard. The class body found this quite funny and whispered amongst themselves, stifling giggles until the bell rang for the start of the period. Summer, Riley, and I abstained from the chatter. After the bell, Mrs. Maston put her phone in a desk drawer. She opened a binder on her desk, studied it a moment, then picked up a piece of chalk and turned to the board. She stopped. She locked eyes with the face and put her empty hand on her hip, then turned back to the class. "Anyone want to claim this?" she asked, her tone implying it might not be a wise idea. The class stared back at her. "No one? Well, just as a reminder, school policy considers obscene drawings on chalkboards as vandalism, so even though maybe this isn't technically obscene..." She trailed off, questioning whether it actually might be, before continuing, "Let's all just agree that drawings like this belong in your notebooks, okay?" Turning back to the board, Mrs. Maston erased my rushed work. Over Mrs. Maston's shoulder, everyone watched as the ghostly remnants of the haunting face, the stains which had inspired Summer's idea, defied the eraser. One student at the front shushed her giggling neighbor and pointed at the board. Summer uttered a small gasp and pointed as well. She nudged Riley, who refused to participate. "It's still there, Mrs. Maston," Summer said after the teacher commenced writing her lesson on the board. "What?" Mrs. Maston asked, turning to look at her. Noticing dumbstruck eyes looking past her, she turned back to the chalkboard, stared, then tipped her head back slightly, non-verbally exclaiming, "Ah." She tried to scrub at the stains, found they were permanent, and gave up. She shrugged at the class and dropped the eraser on her desk. "I don't remember those being there before," Summer said. She stood. She actually stood like we were in a movie, and turned to address the class. "Do any of you remember seeing them? I feel like we would have noticed. I mean, don't they still look exactly like a face?" This was an obvious stretch, but nods of agreement still rippled away from her. That's how much influence the new summer rains had gained that year. Mutters of, "I don't remember. Did you notice them?" and "I never saw them before," repeated throughout the room. Mrs. Maston looked to Riley for help. Riley, slouched back with her arms crossed, shrugged apathetically. Or was it sympathetically? You could never tell with Riley. The only thing anyone knew for sure is that she would back up Summer to the end. Summer asked, "Mrs. Maston, do you keep any smoky quartz or black tourmaline around?" "Actually, I might have a smoky quartz." "That's all right, Summer. I'm sure." Summer interrupted her back. "Sorry, but I wanted to say, I actually felt something really negative when I came in here today. And that face, just looking at it, it felt like a warning. Like an omen, you know?" "Summer," Mrs. Maston warned. "An omen of what?" a boy near me asked. He could have been serious or not. I couldn't tell. "Did you see how it was crying? It looked scared, right? Mrs. Maston said, "Please sit, Summer." Summer sat, but she kept talking. "I think there might be something bad in here, and maybe that face, how it was crying, it was trying to warn us." She pointed again to the dark stains. Even I, knowing the true origin of the face, now thought the stains created a sinister illusion, a vague insinuation of malevolence. "Summer Rains, that is enough," the teacher scolded. Summer stopped, putting her hand to her lips in shock, but this oppression only cast favor on Summer amongst the student audience. Suddenly, those who could not remember whether the stains had been present earlier remembered quite clearly there had been no stains. When the bell rang at the end of class, Summer rose to her feet before anyone else. Loudly, she said, "Sorry, Mrs. Maston, about earlier, but watch out for more omens, okay? I think something might have attached to you." Many of us slowed our exodus to listen to the ensuing interaction, but Mrs. Maston waved us out. To Summer, she said, "Come here, please." I waited by the door but didn't hear much. Summer had to fill me in later. Summer told me she approached the teacher's desk, eyes soft with concern. Mrs. Maston said, "Summer, please be honest. What are you doing? Because I appreciate you have some unique beliefs, but I think you're taking this too far." "I'm not doing anything," Summer lied, feigning shock. She said Mrs. Maston rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Okay, well, no offense, but I think I'm safe from any bad omens. Look at these stains up close, will you?" She ushered Summer to the chalkboard. "See, I'm pretty sure they're just oil stains." "Then how'd they get way up there?" Summer asked. Mrs. Maston softened and asked, "Who knows how anything around here happens? Do you know who really drew that face? I'm not trying to get them in trouble, but I would like to know." Summer said, "Mrs. Maston, if you're worried about—" "I'm not worried, Summer. I just want to know in case other students ask me about it. There are some sensitive kids in your class who might, kids your age are impressionable, and, well, anyway, you really don't know?" Summer pulled a piece of smoky quartz out of her pocket and dropped it on the edge of Mrs. Maston's desk, then stepped back. As mysteriously as an 8th grader can be, she backed toward the door, saying, "Stay safe, Mrs. Maston. I honestly hope you're right." "Well, that didn't work as well as I'd hoped," Summer admitted to Riley and I in the hallway afterward. Such an admission was far out of character for the new Summer Rains. I probably should have distanced myself from her for a while, but I saw my participation in her innocuous crime as an in. I wanted to be close to her, and this was my chance. "She didn't buy the omen thing?" I asked. Summer said, "She thinks they're oil stains." "Aren't they?" asked Riley. Summer sighed. "I don't know, but the whole point was to make her doubt and wonder and get scared. I just wanted to show her she doesn't know everything, you know?" "I think it worked better on the class," said Riley. Everybody was watching those stains on their way out of the room. I said, "I heard some other kids talking about them too, like they were scared." This was true. These were naturally anxious kids that I overheard, but still, they sounded genuinely nervous. Summer said, "Psh, big deal. I'll figure out some other way to get back at Mrs. Maston." Constant questions and mentions of the stains caused Mrs. Maston to cover them with a world map poster the next day. If anyone tried to bring them up anyway, she immediately shut down the conversation, saying, "This is O'Toole Middle School, not Hogwarts. There are no magical spirits running around here." Magical spirits? To hear a teacher mention spirits of any sort keyed spirited discussions amongst the student body, and many of the conversations made their way to Summer. Kids approached her in the hallways asking for confirmation of their theories, trying to win one over on a classmate or friend with a contradicting hypothesis about the stains. Summer told them all she didn't know what was going on, while affecting a tone which suggested she very much knew exactly what was going on. I asked her why she insisted on leading these poor students along, creating chaos which did not seem to be reaching or hurting Mrs. Maston, and she said one of the most honest things she ever told me. "I'm not sure what I'm doing with this yet." And it's too bad she didn't figure it out more quickly, because in that strange way a mob can come to a unanimous consensus when the logical people standing apart fail to, the O'Toole student body soon worked out their own theory behind the stains and the mysterious face which had left them behind. The main story that sparked the students' hypothesis came from a classmate of mine named Garrett Lafferty. I sought him out personally in order to listen to his story firsthand. It went like this. Garrett arrived early to track practice after finishing a 6th period exam early. He'd collected his uniform from his locker and went to the locker room to change, planning to hit the track and do some extra warm-ups. As a side note, Garrett obsessed over his sport. He could run an 800-meter in 2:13, but the school record at the time was 2:11. As an 8th grader, it was going to be his final season, his final chance to shave off those 3 seconds and snag the new record. But Garrett would not run a single meter that day. When he entered the locker room, he found it cloudy with steam. Someone was in the showers, and apparently had been for quite a while. Garrett said he didn't even know the showers could get hot enough to create so much steam. He said, "I suppose if you let it run long enough turned all the way up, it could get there, but usually we're in and out so fast the water's barely room temperature." He changed his clothes and tied his shoes, then went to the mirror to check his hair. The hot cloud stuck to the mirror, making it impossible for him to see more than a blur of himself. He stepped closer to wipe it clean, and his shoe made a sucking squelch on the tiles. Looking down, he saw water trickling between the tiles, running streams along the grout. He had never seen the showers overflow before. "Yo, you good in there?" he called out to whoever must have been boiling themselves alive. No reply came to him. Shrugging, he reached over the sinks and wiped a window in the moisture with the side of his hand. I had to take Garrett at his word about what happened next. In his defense, I'd never known him to lie before. According to him, when he wiped away the stream, the face I drew on the chalkboard, the gaunt, gaping, terrified expression, appeared, outlined in water droplets. A few droplets ran down from the eyes, recreating and bringing life to the tears I had added at the last second on the chalkboard. Garrett said the tiny pupils in the middle of the face's enormous eyes were trained directly at him. He squeezed his own eyes shut to clear them and wiped the mirror again. When he opened his eyes, the face was gone. But as the steam clouded the mirror once more, the outline of the face emerged again. Only this time, the pupils seemed to be staring past him, right over his shoulder, at the showers. Garrett said he reacted to this the same way he would have if a real person had been standing in front of him and looking behind him. That's how lifelike the visage appeared to him. When he turned, all he saw behind him was the brick wall separating the showers from the rest of the locker room. Feeling tricked, he quickly turned back to the mirror. The watery eyes remained trained on the showers, and the dripping tears had become streams running down the mirror, pooling at the bottom and dripping on the counter below. Assaulted by feelings of fear and dread, Garrett called out again. "Hey, who's in there?" Again, he received no answer. Bound by a mysterious conviction, he walked through the cloud to investigate. When he rounded the corner to the showers, the steam was so dense he almost couldn't see the shower posts. But there, laying across the drain in the middle of the floor, was the body of a teenage boy in a swimsuit. Hot water sprayed down upon him from one of the nozzles, splashing off of his reddened skin. He wasn't moving. Garrett yelled for help and rushed in to help the unconscious boy. After shutting off the water, he grabbed him by the shoulders and with great effort rolled him onto his side. The drain gurgled as it sucked the hot puddle down. Wiping sweat from his eyes, Garrett let the boy flop onto his back. He leaned in to see if he was awake or at least breathing. The boy's face made him scream. Puffy and purple, the boy's face had not been recognizable at first, but when he got close, Garrett recognized himself. The unconscious, no, the dead boy at his feet was him. He looked slightly larger and mildly older, though it was hard to tell through the swelling. And when Garrett, the living Garrett, fell back against the shower wall, he noticed an anomaly on the wall across from him. 3 massive dry spots defied the shower spray and steam, remaining impossibly dry. He told me, "Those 3 spots, I don't know how they were there, but they looked exactly like the stains on Mrs. Maston's chalkboard. Like exactly, Marcus. I've been back in her room and looked under the poster to check." Garrett said he ran out of the locker room for help. He bumped into the track coach on the way and brought him into the showers to show him the body. Already, he was doubting what he had seen. How could he have found his own drowned corpse? It must have been another boy who just looked a little bit like him, he thought. The cloud of steam remained. The tiles and grout were still soaking wet, but the body and the giant dry spots on the wall were all gone. Concerned, the track coach called Garrett's mom to take him home. She chalked the whole thing up to stress. Garrett did not tell the coach or his mother he thought the dead kid was himself, or about the dry spots either. He didn't share these details with any adults, only other students, and he told a lot of students. Everyone who had been fearfully speculating about the stains on Mrs. Maston's chalkboard now had a solid reason to believe our school was haunted by something that maybe wanted to hurt us. 2 days after Garrett's locker room incident, the buzz around his story had droned out everything else. Riley almost literally dragged me away from my friends at lunch to go sit with her and Summer at the end of the table closest to the back of the cafeteria. Riley shooed away 3 students who had tried to sit next to Summer in her brief absence to ask about the chalkboard omen and what happened to Garrett. Everyone wanted to talk to Summer about it, and she was more than willing to share her dramatized thoughts. Keeping other kids away from Summer during passing periods and lunch became Riley's full-time job. "It's time, guys," Riley said. "We need to come clean." "We can't," Summer replied through a mouthful of ham sandwich. I said, "Why not? I think Riley's right. It was just supposed to be a stupid prank, right? Principal Gear might be mad, but maybe he'll get it if we just tell him what happened." Summer swallowed, looked at me, and asked, "What did happen, Marcus? Sorry, what happened that is our fault?" Riley inserted, "Well, I didn't really do anything, but you were there," Summer pointed out. "Okay, yeah, I was there, but that's it. That doesn't matter. This whole thing was your idea. You made Marcus do the drawing, then you got the class all freaked out about the stains, and, I don't think I freaked out the class. That was Mrs. Maston," Summer interrupted again. I appreciated that Riley said Summer made me do the drawing. I felt like she would back me up if we did end up in trouble, but I still wasn't ready to betray Summer. I would have been willing to come clean to the teachers and Principal Gear, but only when Summer felt ready. I felt foolishly honor-bound to protect her secret, the secret we shared. Riley got more animated as she grew flustered. "You think Mrs. Maston? Summer, you stood up in front of everyone and told them she was cursed. You told them all to go find some black marble or black tourmaline," Summer corrected. "Okay, whatever, it doesn't matter what kind of, or smoky quartz," Summer added. Riley gritted her teeth. I decided to cut in before the two of them fell out. We needed to be a united front, or else we would all go down. I said, "Hey, it's not like anybody's gotten hurt, right? Garrett's all freaked out, but is that really our fault? What are they going to punish us for? Drawing on the chalkboard?" "It is considered vandalism by school policy," Summer reminded us, taking another bite of her sandwich. Riley and I were not eating. Her, too angry, and me, too nervous. All the talk of getting in trouble tied my innards in knots. I had a question burning in my gut, too, further dampening my appetite. "Hey, Summer," I asked, Sorry if this is a stupid question, but you didn't. What I'm wondering is, do you think Garrett actually saw what he says he saw? He made it up, Summer answered flatly. Really? He doesn't seem like the kind of kid who. He's suddenly Mr. Popular, isn't he? Look at all those girls sitting with him right now. You'd think he has brain cancer or something. Summer had a point. His classmates, particularly the girls, had been showering Garrett with constant attention since his return. Any time I passed him, I heard him relaying his story to someone. I suppose I was one of those someones. But it's not like Garrett had been a nobody like me before his purported encounter. He was no Summer Raines, but he was a star athlete with lots of friends and a new girlfriend every couple of months. I wouldn't think he needed to. His parents split up, Riley said. Huh? I asked, thinking she meant they split up over his story. So? Summer asked. Then I figured out what Riley actually meant. The target audience for Garrett's act out wasn't anyone at school. But Summer, I said when Riley didn't answer her, I've heard other kids talk about seeing the face I drew too. Garrett's story is the most dramatic, but he's not the only kid who says he's seen it. Dripping sarcasm, Riley said, Yeah, and I ran into Zendaya at the Mall of America. Whatever if you trust Garrett, but would you really believe every one of these losers? She asked, gesturing around the cafeteria. I said, No, but why are so many kids talking about it? A few makes sense, but it's like everyone. It's a creepypasta, Summer said. She took another bite. A what? I asked. Riley said, I thought that was like an internet thing. As she chewed, Summer nodded thoughtfully. She swallowed, then said, Yeah, normally, but why can't it happen in real life too? I still don't know what creepypasta is, I said. Summer said, Not creepypasta, a creepypasta. It's basically a scary story somebody puts online that goes viral and makes a lot of people believe in it. Ever heard of Slenderman? Or Smile Dog? Slenderman sounded familiar, and I said as much. Well, that's a creepypasta. Somebody made it up and it got so big a girl actually stabbed her friend because she believed Slenderman wanted her to. Seriously? Riley asked. Summer nodded. I think we accidentally created a creepypasta here. And as long as nobody gets hurt, it's kind of fun, right? I don't know, I said. A lot of kids are really scared. And didn't you just say some girl stabbed her friend over one of these stories? Riley added. Summer said, Yeah, in a country full of millions of kids, one girl went crazy. Big deal. All I'm saying is that we can either rat ourselves out and get in trouble over nothing, or we can just have fun with it. I doubt it'll last long anyway. Something else will come along and make everybody forget. The conversation more or less ended there. I wanted more comfort, I think, from Summer, but the bell was going to ring soon. We all had class with Mrs. Maston after lunch again, so we walked there together, but did not talk. Instead, we listened to the voices around us. As we neared the history classroom, I looked at Summer. Her porcelain face had a bluish hue and expressed wordless discomfort. The Summer Raines walking beside me was not the girl who beckoned me into the history room days before. She had lost her self-assured certainty. Our eyes met, and she quickly looked away, suddenly restoring her stoic facade. But I could tell it was only an act. We settled into our desks, Riley and Summer next to each other, me slightly behind them to their right. Rain poured outside hard enough to hear through the thick windows. It trickled down the glass in distracting streams, the sort that can hypnotize young students. Before the official start of class, a student walked up to Mrs. Maston's desk and whispered something to her. I watched Mrs. Maston glance over her shoulder at the world map poster covering the stains on her chalkboard. She quietly dismissed the student with an expression somewhere between sympathy and frustration. When the bell rang, she stood to address us all. Okay, class, we need to have a chat about these. She ripped the poster off the chalkboard, exposing the infamous stains to us all. She said, I gather these stains have been causing some rumors to go around about some kind of haunting? Well, I think it's time to put those rumors to bed, don't you? I actually found out where these stains came from. Yes, we teachers talk too. Mr. Gantz knew exactly how the chalkboard got stained. It's been a couple of years, so maybe you don't remember, but this used to be the art room before the new wing was built. Mr. Gantz said during a unit on oil painting, he hung paper on the board and did a technique demonstration without realizing the oils from his paint would soak through to the board. He noticed pretty quickly and stopped before it got any worse. So there you go. The stains have been there for years, but you all didn't notice until somebody decided to draw attention to them. She looked briefly in my direction, and I tried not to squirm. Did she know it was me? It easily could have been a coincidence, so I tried not to look guilty. Her gaze passed by, and I readjusted in my seat to release some of the tension. I'm sure whoever drew that face a few days ago meant nothing by it, but maybe that person would like to come forward to help calm everyone down. I think we would all feel better if... A piercing bell sent us all into a frenzy. Above the door, the fire alarm flashed. A student I could not see said, "Calm down, people, it's probably just a drill." But Mrs. Maston sounded nervous when she said, "Leave your things at your desk and get in line. Remember, single file straight down the hall and out the gym door." "Is it a drill?" Riley asked. I didn't think the teachers were allowed to say, but if that was true, Mrs. Maston disregarded the rule. She looked at Riley and subtly shook her head. We followed protocol to the letter, having done at least a dozen fire drills in our years at O'Toole Middle School. We and the students from other classes lined the hallways, all nervously filing out of the building. Those who tried to whisper to each other were instantly silenced by teachers standing beside their classroom doors. Due to the heavy rain, Principal Gear ordered us onto the parked buses for shelter. The fire department arrived on scene as we all loaded up. We were all soaked, students and staff alike, as we waited for the fire marshal to clear the building. There didn't appear to be any fire. No one had smelled smoke on the way out of the building, so we weren't surprised to learn whoever pulled the fire alarm did so without cause. An angry search for the culprit began and ended with a 7th grader named Kelly, whom I'd never met. But hearing her story, I realized I was the true culprit. Me, Summer, and that crude face I drew on the chalkboard. Kelly had sheltered on the same bus as me, so I got to hear her story firsthand before the faculty apprehended her. She'd been sitting next to the window in English class, gazing out at the falling rain. Hundreds of raindrops dotted the glass. Some ran down the windows like streaking tears. Kelly made this comparison in her mind and noticed 2 parallel streaks that appeared to consistently run down the glass without zigging and zagging as they contacted other droplets. This bizarre inconsistency captured her attention, and she watched the 2 streams, waiting for even one of them to break off and to behave normally, or to dissolve into droplets again. But as she watched, she noticed a second anomaly. Above each of the 2 streams, large, circular dry patches defied the downpour. In the center of these dry circles sat 1 droplet in each, like the tiny pupils of enormous eyes. Then, the rest of the face took shape. The shape of a face I have already described so many times. Kelly knew Garrett's story and how it had begun with him spotting the face in the steam on the mirror. The obvious similarity to what she now saw in the window caused her to flinch away in alarm. The teacher paused, and most of her classmates turned toward Kelly. She smiled awkwardly and pretended nothing had happened, which convinced everyone else to do the same. She rubbed her eyes and looked back at the window. Still, the face remained, and she felt certain those quivering raindrop pupils were trained directly at her. Kelly interrupted her teacher to ask to be excused to the restroom. Despite his obvious irritation at a second disruption from her, he gave her a hall pass. Without looking back at the face, Kelly hurried out of the room. After shutting the door, she took a few steps away and collected herself. With space and the door between her and the window, she felt much safer. but she found herself afraid to go to the bathroom like she said she was going to. A bathroom is too similar to a locker room, and Garrett's story remained fresh on her mind. So she stood in the middle of the hallway, unsure of where to go next. When she looked down the hallway, she noticed the door to the teacher's lounge because of a strange light flashing erratically behind it. Under the bright fluorescence in the hallway, the flashing light was hard to discern, but she noticed it all the same, and it made her curious. Anything to distract her from the face on the window. She walked toward the door, listening for any approaching footsteps and preparing to divert to the restroom if a staff member discovered her. Closer, Kelly started to smell smoke. It had a strange odor, not like a bonfire or a grill, but a sort of sour, rubbery tinge, like when too much hair got stuck in a vacuum cleaner. Kelly moved faster, now concerned there might be a serious problem. A flickering light, the smell of smoke. Was there a fire in the teacher's lounge? She arrived at the door, next to which were 3 square glass windows stacked vertically. Posters touting O'Toole's core values mostly obstructed them from inside the glass, but the posters had not been printed to the window's exact size. Kelly closed one eye and peeked through the half-inch of clear glass bordering the middle poster. A girl about her same size and build, wearing a backpack identical to hers, although more tarnished, was standing next to the lounge's kitchenette with her back turned to Kelly. This seemed strange because students were not allowed in the teacher's lounge. But fortunately, there did not appear to be any fire. Still curious and pleasantly distracted, Kelly spied on the girl in the lounge a moment longer. As if sensing eyes upon her, the girl started turning slowly. As she did, one of her backpack straps broke. The bag swung away from her back, slipping off her other arm, and fell to the floor. She made no attempt to stop it. The sleeve of her polyester shirt appeared to be melted onto her skin, which could have explained the burning smell. Had this student suffered some terrible accident? But why would she be in the teacher's lounge and not the nurse's office? She kept turning until Kelly could finally see her face, or what was left of it. The girl's charred skin barely clung to her skull anymore. Kelly could see the white of her bones through her burns. There remained only enough of her features for Kelly to realize the girl in the lounge, now staring back at her through empty eye sockets, was herself. She looked taller, and her hair, which had been burned off in the front, looked longer, but otherwise, she could have been Kelly's twin. Kelly covered her mouth and stepped back from the window in horror. As she did, the windows glowed orange behind the posters, and black smoke started billowing out from the top of the door. The poster in the middle frame caught fire. The flames ate 3 holes in it, which expanded rapidly until they made the familiar pattern of the stains on Mrs. Maston's chalkboard. The holes were outlined in flame, but stopped growing at a certain size in proportion to each other. The upper 2 seemed to stare at Kelly, and the lower one appeared to be screaming at her. She could hear her own voice screaming in agony. Then, she realized the voice she heard was literally her own. She hadn't even realized she was screaming. Without another thought, she ran over to the nearest fire alarm and pulled it. Principal Gear called Kelly's dad to take her home, and the rest of us attempted to finish the school day normally. No one, not even the teachers, seemed able to focus though. At the end of the day, I gathered my things from my locker and made my way out of the school. Passing Mrs. Maston's classroom with the door cracked open just slightly, I heard whimpering sobs and stopped. I gave the door a small push, opening it just enough to see into the room. There, up at the front, I saw Riley and Summer. The powerful stink of ammonia sat heavy on the air. Riley was holding a spritzer bottle and a rag she must have swiped from the janitor's cart, and Summer was standing on a chair with another rag in hand, scrubbing furiously at the stains on the chalkboard. They heard me and looked my way. Riley's face looked stoic and a little angry. Summer's was streaked in tears, blackened by her mascara. Snot coated her upper lip. She was a wreck. I entered the classroom and wordlessly took Riley's other rag. Then I climbed up on the chair behind Summer and helped her scrub. Just as no one ever found out who drew the face on the chalkboard, no one besides me, Riley, and Summer ever learned how the stains vanished from the board. Someone, Summer, ensured a new rumor spread that the curse had ended. It took a few weeks for talk of the stains to die away, but eventually new gossip took over the minds of the student body, and O'Toole's little creepypasta was forgotten. Summer, Riley, and I all believed for years that Garrett and Kelly's stories were simply the result of the hysteria that took over our school during those few days. But years later, we would all have to question the validity of that stance. It started with the tragic news of Garrett's death. In a freak boating accident during spring break our senior year, Garrett drowned. And less than a year later, Kelly's house caught fire while she was home alone. Sadly, she did not make it out. After Kelly died, Summer and I met up. Riley had already left for college, and Summer said she had stopped talking to her. Summer was blonde and wore glasses again. Over the years, she had tried to distance herself from the person who beckoned me into Mrs. Maston's classroom that fateful day. We talked for a long time, mostly me trying to comfort her. She felt understandable guilt about Garrett and Kelly. I assured her their deaths, tragic and unexpected as they were, might have just been coincidences. Other classmates had also died, after all, from car accidents, cancer, and other illnesses, both physical and mental. I still had feelings for Summer, which made it so much harder to lie. Although I don't know what we could have done or how we could have done it, I worry we might have actually brought something terrible into the school that day. Did it kill Garrett and Kelly, and perhaps others? Or was it simply an omen providing warnings of already fated events? The latter is what I told Summer it probably was, but I don't think she believed me. And why would she, when I'm not sure I even believe it myself? I'm just glad I never saw that face after it was erased, except for in my mind. It will haunt me there, forever. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods. If you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.